So the other day, I walked into Coffee Fusion. I was going to get a little work done. Coffee Fusion's a nice little coffee shop over on Thompson Lane. If you haven't been there before, I'd recommend it. You know, a friend of mine walked in right behind me. His name is Jack. Jack says, "Scott, long time no see," tapping me on the shoulder. I looked over and I said, "Wow, Jack, how you doing?" He says, "I'm doing real well." I said, "You know, as long as I bumped into you, do you mind if I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain for a minute?" With my usual self-deprecating humor, I looked up and said, "Well, you're not going to need much of a pick, and it ain't going to take you a lot of time, but that'll be just fine." I ordered a coffee, just plain old coffee, from the nice lady at the counter. She said, "Would you like it hot or cold?" And I'm thinking to myself, is there any other way to drink coffee? But anyway, I ordered hot coffee. Jack ordered something like a Vietnamese chilled something or another, and like that was a real thing. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but she got it for him. As we were waiting on our order, Jack looked up at me and says, "Are you buying any properties these days?" And I looked at and I said, "You know what? It's getting kind of tougher. The prices have gone up quite a bit. It's kind of hard to find some properties." He says, "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to know, should I still be buying properties in this market?" I thought about it a second. I said, "We're definitely going to need to sit down and talk about this. This is a much longer answer than a yes or a no answer." So we got our coffees and went over to a high top table over in the corner and started to talk. He reiterated his question. Should I really buy properties when the market's so high like this? I looked at him and said, "Well, I've got to bounce that question back to you and say, why shouldn't you buy properties in this market?" And he says, "Well, prices are so high. And why would I buy anything in the markets where the price is this high?" I thought about that for a second and I looked at him and said, "Well, you know, price is relative. For starters, it depends on where you're at. Most of my properties are in the Nashville area market, and yes, prices are pretty high in the Nashville market. We have another office in Memphis, and prices are not too terribly high in Memphis. If you're looking for a cash flow play, Memphis is a pretty good place to look. But let's just go ahead and stick with our market." I said, "Jack, do you really believe that no matter what this market does, that the value of the property you purchase today is going to be worth more 10 years from now?" He thought about that a moment and said, "Well, yeah." I said, "No matter what the market does." He says, "Well, if we wind up, with a Flint, Michigan problem or something maybe." I conceded that. I said, "Okay, I concede the limited little 0.01% chance that something catastrophic could happen, an earthquake or something like that could affect it. Otherwise, do you truly believe that it's going to be worth more 10 years from now than it is today, no matter what the macroeconomics do?" He says, "Yeah, I believe that." I said, "Then what's stopping you? There's just no reason not to." He says, "Well, I never really thought about it that way." He says, "But I just can't bring myself to buy when it's at a peak." I looked at him and I said, "Well, I agree with you that prices appear to be high, and I will even concede that we probably have a looming correction or crash or whatever somebody wants to call it ahead of us. When that's going to happen is the challenge." I remember before the Great Recession, oh my gosh, I saw real estate investors just after the tech bubble popped in 1999. They were all saying, real estate's next. Somewhere around 2002, many of them were saying, "I'm going to pocket my money. I'm not buying anything right now. The market is too high." That was 6-7 years before the market crashed. Look at all that appreciation they sacrificed. 2004 rolled around, even more investors were keeping money in their pocket. 2006 rolled around, even more of them were. Again, just it's all this equity that they were just sacrificing because they tried to time the market. And then secondarily, there's a lot of psychological theory that will tell us that it's, not only can we not time the market, that even if we did, most of us do not have the intestinal fortitude to buy when blood is in the streets. It's just really hard to do that. It's hard to get up in the morning when everybody is negative and doom and gloom is everywhere. CNN is telling you the sky is falling. Fox News is telling you that the market is plummeting. It's hard to get out of bed and say, "I'm going to go buy a piece of property today." It's just hard to do that. Now, I hear some of you out there saying right now, "Well, Scott, I could do it. No doubt about it, I could do it. You know what? There are some of you that could. No doubt about it. There are some of you that absolutely could. It would be the rare individual that could. I met a lot of people that made a lot of money in the last Great Recession. I mean, they were buying properties left and right. They had saved the money to do it and made a fortune in the Great Recession. Most of us were not able to pull the trigger. So I tell people all the time, and I told Jack, if you've got the money, buy it. He says, but rents seemed kind of low also. I thought about that a second too, and I agreed with him. Relative to what price of housing is, rents are kind of low these days. There's no doubt about it. Doesn't look that way from a renter standpoint, because a renter is paying more in rent today than they have ever. But relative to what houses cost, rents are pretty low. For that matter, I looked at Jack and I said, yes, I agree. The real problem today is not the price of the property. The real problem today is the cap rate. Cap rates are too low today. I could see in Jack's eyes that I'd kind of gone over his head a little bit. So I said, okay, let me explain. A cap rate, what is also called capitalization rate, is basically the return you would get, the percentage return you would get on investment if you had the property paid for after all your expenses. Now, I'm vastly oversimplifying this, but that's the basic of it. So let's say, Jack, you give $100,000 for a piece of property, and at the end of the year, you're able to get $5,000 cash out of this property after every expense is paid, every lawn care, every painting, every plumbing repair, management. After everything is paid for, you got $5,000. That would be a 5% cap rate. I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. I said, the challenge with today's market is people are happy with 5%. He looks up at me and says, Scott, that just doesn't sound too much like getting out of bed for a 5% return on your investment. I tend to agree with him. That can be very frustrating if you really think of it that way. If you're looking at your cash on cash at being 5%, or if you're financing it, your cash on cash is even less. It's hard to get excited about that. I had to point out to him that in today's market, the cash flow play is not what you're playing. In today's market, you're playing the equity and wealth build play. Besides, never has wealth been created through cash flow. Cash flow tends to come and go. Wealth is created in the ownership of the property long term. And I pointed out to him, yes, you're right, 5% is hard to get excited about, and even with that, it's better than a lot of investments. I mean, look at your other relatively safe investments. And he was even asking me, what would I do? And I pointed out to him, relatively safe investments, and I'm comparing it to, not something that's really volatile like a stock or something like that, or a junk bond or anything like that. I'm comparing it to something like let's look at savings accounts. Savings accounts basically pay nothing. Your money market accounts are 1%. Even a long-term CD, you're going to max out at 2.5% today? When you look at it, 5% isn't all that bad. That is why people are settling for the low cap rates these days. As long as interest rates stay as low as they are and people cannot make any money on their money, people are going to go into real estate and be happy with those 5% cap rates. And if we go back to the days one time, before, say, the tech bubble crashed, when your money market accounts were yielding 5 or 6%, then why would anybody buy real estate at 5 or 6%? Now your cap rates are going to go up. But that's not here yet. That's future time. We'll see if that comes to fruition. Jack says, okay, that makes sense. But I really don't want 5% of my money. I want to do better than that. Well, so does everybody else. Even you guys watching me today, you want to do better than 5%. I don't blame you. So I pointed out to him, I said, Jack, the cash on cash is not where the wealth is built. You turn that small little 5% cap rate into something closer to 15% time you factor in everything that goes into the return on your investment. He says, how does 5% magically become 15%? Is it magic? I laughed. It does kind of sound like magic. I said, no, Jack, it's math. Although sometimes math can be magical. In this case, we're talking about equity return. We're talking about building wealth through equity in the property. Yes, you got this little 5% return on your cap rate. You borrow some money on it, so your cap rate becomes, your return on investment becomes a little bit less, cash on cash. You borrow some money on it, you leverage it. So let's say you've got $50,000 that you want to put into a $150,000 house. And that $150,000 house appreciates 5% that year. That's $7,500 you just earned. That's not $7,500 on the $150,000, because remember, you only have $50,000 in it. That's $7,500 on the $50,000 investment. Now that's a 15% cap rate, a 15% return all by itself. Now I'll readily admit, we are most likely not going to see an annual appreciation rate of 15%, or of 5%. But come on, let's face it, 3% is not out of the ordinary. Based on a $50,000 investment, that's still a heck of a return. Now you add that to the fact that $100,000 loan is being paid for by who? By somebody else. That gap is widening and widening and widening on appreciation. You put the cash on cash return, that's my favorite part, the cash on cash. You put that on top of it, and yes, mathematically, it becomes 15, 14, 16%, whatever the math turns out to be. That's called the internal rate of return. Once again, I'm vastly oversimplifying it, but that gets you the gist. Jack thinks about it for a second. Says, you know what? That doesn't sound all that bad. Maybe I need to go buy me another rental house. I looked at him and smiled, sipped my coffee, and I said, only if it fits your investment needs. And by the way, don't be in a rush. Buy what works for you and fits into your investment portfolio. But if you want to own real estate and you can afford to own real estate, buy it and don't wait. Jack started to stand up because he had polished his iced, Vietnamese coffee, whatever it was he had. He polished it off. And he says, man, I really am glad that I bumped into you today. And I said, me too. I sure hope I can help you in the future. And for those of you watching, if you haven't put it together yet, I'm Scott Abernathy with Property Management Inc., PMI Professionals, right here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We have another office in Memphis. That's PMI of Memphis. If we can help you in any way in your real estate investments, please let us know. We can manage them for you. We can help you find them. We can help you acquire them, or we can dispose of them for you. Whatever you need, we can help you with that. You can reach out to us at rentfrompmi.com or give us a call at 615-867-8282. Happy landlording.